G'day guys, how you doing? It's the Kiwi and I'm back with another video. So over the last couple of months, actually not couple, most probably about 6 to 8 months, I've had a number of you actually ask me what's going on in New Zealand, what the heck's happening down there, also what's going on in Australia, etc. Well, I can't tell you exactly what's going on in Australia because I wasn't living down there over the last number of years. However, I do have a really good handle on what's happening in New Zealand. So we're going to focus on New Zealand. However, what I need you guys to know is that what's actually happening in New Zealand is most probably the exact same thing that's happening in certain states in Australia, and it's definitely the same thing that's happening in certain states in the United States. I mean, in all sincerity, the politics that is going on in California, for argument's sake, I lived there for 26 years, is actually no different to the politics that's going on in New Zealand. I mean, New Zealand's politics, well, New Zealand socially and politically is actually so similar to California now, they might as well call New Zealand New California. I mean, seriously, it's just like, oh my God. I couldn't get over it when I got down there. You know, I flew into New Zealand just 2 days after the terrorist shooting in Christchurch, and it was just asinine buffoonery. Continue buffoonery. Unbelievable. I mean, it was just nauseating. But the main reason I'm doing this video is literally today, the New Zealand Prime Minister and her crew have come out and admitted that the whole lockdown thing isn't working. I was like, oh my God. I literally was saying the exact same thing before the lockdown, before the first lockdown last year. I said, and I quote, I even posted it on my old Facebook page that got taken over by somebody else and they deleted all my pictures and everything. I literally said on that Facebook page that locking the entire country down will be the worst thing that you can do. However, I'm going to explain to you the reasons why the New Zealand government has actually been locking the country down and been doing what it's been doing. It's literally modern day Marxism. I mean, that's literally it. And the reason why it's modern day Marxism is these individuals that are running these states or these countries, their fundamental brainwashing is actually Marxist. And I'm going to explain to you just why it's Marxist. You see, to understand this, we have to go all the way back to the 1920s in Europe, when the National Socialists and the Communists were fighting each other. Well, then as the National Socialists got more and more power, the reason why they were allowed to get more power was Germany had an extremely small army after the First World War. Germany's military got decimated. So the government had to call upon the Nazis to actually try to fight off the actual communists. And what happened was, once they finally got ultimate power in Germany, the communists actually had to flee Germany. And primarily the reason why they had to flee Germany was the majority of them, over 85% of them, were all of a specific nationality. So what happened was these individuals ended up fleeing to different parts of the world. Some fled to Palestine, some fled to England, and some fled to the United States. And other countries too, South Africa, they ended up all over the place. However, the ones that ended up in the United States, there's a group of individuals that had taken up residence at the Frankfurt School in Germany, even though these individuals weren't professors or teachers or anything like that. They took up residence in a building at the Frankfurt School in Germany. Now, these individuals were extremely butthurt. They were communists, full-blown communists. They were extremely butthurt with the fact that the Workers' Revolution had not taken over the world. It had only taken over Russia, and they're extremely upset with this. So they were trying to think of a way of rebranding Marxism to resell it to the rest of the world. Now, the interesting thing was that project was called the Free Thought Project. It wasn't called, how can we rebrand or resell Marxism to the world? No, it was called the Free Thought Project. So these individuals, once they fled Germany, ended up in different areas in the United States, at different higher education establishments, etc. One of them, however, a gentleman by the name of Herbert Marcuse, ended up working for the OSS. Now, if any of you know what the OSS is, or don't know what the OSS is, the OSS was the precursor to what is today known as the modern-day CIA. Now, interestingly enough, that individual became an expert in wartime propaganda. So once the Second World War was over and Herbert Marcuse was able to get back into mainstream academia, he started really pushing this whole Marxist belief, this Marxist ideology. And during the 50s, he wrote a book called Eros and Civilization. And that's where it all started to fall into place. Eros and Civilization is the fundamental basis of the sexual revolution. They literally rebranded Marxism and the communist revolution, the workers' revolution, to the sexual revolution. And when you read Eros and Civilization and the Communist Manifesto, the similarities between the two books are rather airy. And the major ones that stand out the most, outside of a lot of wording being exactly the same, etc., is in the Communist Manifesto. You've got the bourgeoisie. In Eros and Civilization, you've got the patriarchy. In the Communist Manifesto, you've got the proletariat. The proletariat was the beat down, broken down worker. The proletariat in Eros and Civilization is this, apparently, the beat down, downtrodden female. And the workers' revolution in the Communist Manifesto became the sexual revolution in Eros and Civilization. Straight up, can't make it up. Read the two books, have at it. If you want to put your mind through that sort of mental gymnastics, the two books are a lot to read, especially Eros and Civilization. It's unreal. Now, here's this bizarre thing about it, is that there was none of this batshit crazy equality up until third and fourth wave feminism. And it was because Marcuse and his cohorts went on this whirlwind tour around the United States, Canada, other Western countries, Europe, and they really hammered this book into the higher education facilities. I mean, there's pictures of Herbert Marcuse standing on a Volkswagen bus at Berkeley in front of 80,000 wide-eyed teenagers. What a better way to sell a revolution, a sexual revolution, to a bunch of teenagers whose sexual libidos are through the frickin' roof. This was the brilliance behind what they were doing. But what people don't understand is just how perverse their study and their research was that led up to them discovering and figuring out this stuff. I mean, these guys practiced basically pedophilia with 5-year-olds. They had 5-year-olds doing sexual experiments with each other. These people were severely demented individuals. So what has happened is this stuff has been pushed through academia like nothing else on earth, because all these individuals that were at these higher education facilities around the world, these universities, these individuals ended up going into corporations and local government, you know, major heads of state today. You know, Nancy Pelosi's, Feinstein's, Schumer's, all these individuals are the result of these individuals' education, these individuals' teachings. So as this stuff, and they ended up in higher levels of academia, and then it's just funneled its way all the way down to literally kindergarten, everywhere. It's in your sheriff's departments, your police departments today. It's in your hospitals. It's everywhere. So they knew this. They knew that they had to hit the higher education facilities. So that's why we're seeing today these individuals that are coming out of these facilities so angry towards the European-based male is the tip of the spear for everything that they hate now, because we represent patriarchy. We represent the supposed devil's spawn of the settlers and how they settled these countries. Like in New Zealand, what's going on down there has nothing to do with saving the country. It has everything to do with destroying anything that the settlers and the relatives of the settlers, they don't differentiate between, all they see is a European-based male who was born and raised in New Zealand is the ancestors of the settlers, even though I wasn't. I mean, my family moved there in the 1920s, late 1800s, early 1900s. So the reality is my family had nothing to do with the settling of New Zealand. However, because of my complexion, suddenly anything to do with anything European-based has to be destroyed. Everything to do with colonialism has to be destroyed. The country has to be bankrupted. Australian, different states in Australia have to be, the economies have to be destroyed. We have to get rid of this scourge. We have to bring in all these people of brown complexions from India, from Asia, from South America, and bring them into a country like New Zealand by the millions and actually rebuild it and wash the European-based person out. That is literally what the frickin' the communists did in Russia. Once they got rid of the bourgeoisie, the super wealthy at the top of the pile, then they were able to get their hands on everything down below and rebuild it how they felt it should have been ran or rebuilt in the beginning. However, here's the problem. As it's been proven in Russia, in China, and other areas around the world, it leaves the door wide open for a dictator to step in. Well, that dictator would happen to be the one world government, new world order, whatever you want to call it. And the Premier of Victoria actually said that. Because she's having to, she's resigned. She's had to step down because she's gotten caught with her fingers in the cookie jar because a lobbyist from Pfizer has been in Australia paying off all the politicians to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. So what's happened is she just straight out, she was like, well, pretty much if I'm going to be thrown under the bus, then I'm going to take you guys down with me. And she straight out said, she goes, yeah, all this stuff that's been happening in Victoria and Australia is all part of the New World Order agenda. She just like, she put it out there, And that's literally what's happening in New Zealand. That whole New World Order stuff, just like old man Bush said, he repeated it multiple times over. Bill Gates has repeated it multiple times over. All these individuals have repeated this stuff. It's literally a Marxist organization. And I can get into far greater detail about this. However, I would highly, highly, highly recommend, first and foremost, you guys researching the Frankfurt School. Because that's where this is where this degeneracy actually started. And the crazy thing about it is if you looked at the United States after the Second World War, the women weren't downtrodden in any way, shape, or form. The women were revered in the United States because of what the woman had done to help their men fight in Germany. All the major manufacturing in the United States, the aircraft, the guns, the munitions, the tanks, the hardware, everything to support the whole war movement in the United States was 80%, 90% women. Women ran the country while their men were off overseas fighting. So even when the men came back, there was still millions of women that stayed in the workforce. The Second World War literally freed women in the United States. They didn't need feminism in any way, shape or form. However, through specific routes, through the younger generation, think about it, it was all those women that worked their asses off during the Second World War. It was their children that ended up turning on them. Those individuals that worked their asses off literally had children that ended up becoming third wave feminists. Not all of them, but a good number of them. And then those third wave feminists brought into the world the fourth wave feminists, which is what we're seeing today. And when I mean feminists, I'm talking not just females, I'm talking females and males. You cannot just lump it into one group or one gender anymore. It's both sexes, both females and males, feminists. That's where the rot has set in. And that's what you're seeing happen in New Zealand. That's what you're seeing happen in certain states in Australia. And that's what you're seeing happen in certain states in the United States now, is literally Marxism. Straight up. That's all it is. So until the next video, guys, make it great. Cheers.